So this is going to be a little bit of a different live stream because I probably sat there with my finger over the go live button for probably 5 minutes. But I wanted to share this with you because if you have ever been in a situation where you've suppressed yourself, suppressed your emotions, and you've disconnected from yourself, then that's going to show up in every area. It's going to show up in your business. And I want to share with you what that looked like for me in my life. And not just for how it affected me, but how it affected my business. And there's a whole story around how it affected my marriage. For me, my story of addiction started when I was 11. And when I talk about addiction, I'm specifically referring to porn. And my relationship with that thing was a means of emotional suppression and of getting away from this, getting away from me and like what was inside this. But it also looks like other things. If it wasn't that, if it wasn't porn, then it was alcohol. If it wasn't alcohol, it was weed. If it wasn't weed, it was sugar. If it wasn't sugar, it was coffee. Kind of going down the line there. But I want to share this relevant part of this story for you. If you've been in a place where you've betrayed yourself, it feels true, where you've betrayed yourself. So it started when I was 11, and at that time, I don't know what was going on in my life. I was 11 years old. I was curious. But where things got really screwy for me, where things got really like dark, and I want to just focus in on this piece for a second, is the first time in my life that I really experienced any kind of trauma or pain. And I was 14. My best friend at that time passed away suddenly. And this thing that had been there, this curiosity, suddenly became a way to medicate and get away from pain. It became a way to get away from myself. And once I figured that out, once I figured out that if I went and did this thing, if I went and looked at porn, that I would numb out, I wouldn't feel anything, it was game over. It was like immediately, it just exploded in my life and took over most of my teen years. And I share that to kind of give you a perspective on how like the things that we use to distract very quickly become our masters. And there is actually a point as I got through my teen years and into politics, when I started my business, and I think this is really important for you to understand, because for me, it was this thing that was there. It was a numbing agent. I would go into this pattern that I couldn't see for years, like just this thing that would just happen, and I felt like so powerless, so helpless. Like I would just see it coming, and I knew that I didn't want to do it. And it was like, I don't know how to stop myself. I don't know how to stop. And I would just like see this like pit with spikes in it from a mile away. And I couldn't stop running right into it. And this happened over and over and over and over and over and over again for years. And I never understood why. why am I doing this? Well, the only answer I had was, well, I must be a piece of crap. I must be like this horrible person to like do this. Obviously, look at what I'm doing. I'm obviously horrible. And that just fed the cycle. Now, like, you take that person, that insecure person, and then you put them into a business where, I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, like, you know the stresses of entrepreneurship. Like, you take that person and put them into like one of the most stressful experiences, stressful vocations on the planet. Oh man. Like, it went from this thing that was like there to just full blown hell. Just hell. And I want to give you that picture and share with you like what's coming up for me as I even share this. Like, I'm sharing this because like this is part of the process for sharing your story. And like hearing myself speak these words aloud is like, it's weird and it's healing. It brings up like so much, like I can just feel it right here. And I want to just give you that picture into like what's going on with me right now as I'm sharing that, because like this is what we do with entrepreneurs and our clients. This is how we like, this is the work. It's taken me a long time to realize that this is the work. But I want to like zoom in for a second on like that person that I was. You know, I've talked before publicly about like what it was like for me starting my business in 2019 and like how chaotic it was and like how just crazy and like I didn't know how to deal with it and I was voiceless. And like I wasn't just voiceless because like that was my pattern and that's how I learned how to deal with life. I was voiceless because like I was so scared to speak and I was so scared to feel when I spoke. Like what I was running from was like this right here. Every single day I woke up and was like, how do I get away from this? How do I get away from this? And that is what I did, is I got away from it as much as I could in this insane, stressful crucible of experience. And it just got so out of control. So freaking out of control. Within 1 month, I lost 3 of my most important support systems. I had a falling out with some friends. I had a family member that I couldn't talk to. And my work family that I'd been with was gone. This was all June 2019. And after that, like that medicating, just numbness of porn just became the go-to. It just became the go-to. And it was simply a vehicle for me to avoid dealing with myself, to avoid facing myself, to avoid walking through like the painful parts of like, why was this happening? Why was I running away from this? Why couldn't I manage it? What was actually occurring that forced me to move, or that caused me to think that that was an attractive choice with all of its damage, all of its chaos, knowing that it wasn't good for me, wasn't good for anyone around me. And we do this when I wasn't addicting and medicating with that or alcohol. I was addicting and medicating with my business. And like it became this entity of like, just throw myself into this and distract from work. And it was like this sick, twisted relationship that I had with my own business, where on one hand, I'm like, I hate you because you're making me feel all kinds of pain. You're bringing up all sorts of stuff that I would rather not deal with. So I'm going to go medicate with this thing over here. And on the other hand, looking at it being like, you're my savior. And I'm going to throw myself into you and you fix this. Make me busy enough, make me money. If I just have enough money, if I just have enough leads, if I just have enough sales, it will be okay here. And like all of that was a lie. All of it was a lie. So it wasn't until April 2020 when things started to change. And I want to give you hope, if you're listening, if you're watching the replay, that this story has a turning point, and so does yours. And part of that turning point was being able to share the story with people who understood for the first time since I was like 15. I'm 29. So I was 28 when I found support. So I'd been on my own trying to manage and deal with this thing all by myself for over a decade. And even when in high school, like, it wasn't like there was any real help available. It was all overly religious band-aids. I got my own thing about how the church talks about porn. Like, that's a topic for another live stream. But ultimately, like, what changed in being able to, like, work through this thing that had so much power in my life was being able to talk about the story with people who understood what it was like. And for me to share my story, and other people just resonated with it. And they're like, that's my story too. Like, I share this with you because this is the work. This is the work of sharing your story online, sharing it on social media, generating leads, and like attracting clients. It's not about the framework. The story economy is great. 7 stories to attract your ideal clients. And it works. But it only works. It only works when you start to take yourself on in a loving and compassionate way. And that's an everyday thing. And like, what came up for me and like why I'm sharing this with you today is just feeling like incongruency in my practice around that. And I started to feel emotionally unstable around some things, feeling easily triggered, and realized that, the work here of what I need to do to manage this thing, this addiction, because the addiction just changes. Like, the addiction changes, and the only thing that has kept me free, that has freed me, is absolutely surrendering my life to Jesus. Even though I've been a Christian my entire life, I didn't know any of what that meant. And I feel like I'm just starting now to see it. Just now starting to see it. Especially growing up in this environment where that was the only answer you were given, but it was the most impractical thing ever. So impractical. So I'm sharing this with you for a few reasons. One, this story, like, there are multiple layers of it. Multiple layers of what I've had to work through, how it's affected my marriage. Like, I can't even begin to tell you. And that's a conversation that I need to have with Carla about how much we share right now. But I want to do 2 things. I want to, number one, let you know that if you are ever in that space where you're struggling with addiction, you're struggling with porn addiction specifically, you can always reach out. Number 2, your addiction and your method of emotional suppression shows up in you not sharing your stories. It shows up when you don't feel emotionally safe to share your story. Then there's some kind of emotional suppression that's happening. It's part of why it's taken me so long to tell this story. Because, like, I don't want to face it. I want to, like, not talk about it. But it's important because I know that there's someone out there who struggles with the same thing, or it shows up in a completely different way and they're looking at their leads and their sales and their delivery and they think that there's something wrong in those areas, when the reality is that you're disconnected from your business because you're disconnected from yourself. And that is my story. The story of someone who has spent well over 2 decades, 2.5 decades, almost 3, of trying to get out of a relationship with myself and trying to suppress that emotion. So I'll leave you with this. This work of sharing your stories is a healing work. And yes, it attracts clients. That's a byproduct. But being able to show up and talk through these things and share who you are, who you really are, it's one of the most powerful things you could do. Thank you for watching. If you were watching, thank you for checking out the replay. If you're checking out the replay, if you're ever in that space where you feel that there's something disconnected between you and what you're doing, reach out and let's talk about it. I have been down that road and I've had to face off with so many demons to be able to be in this space right now where I can even talk about this. So your story matters, my story matters, and I'll see you later.